Testing, 1, 2, 3. Margaret, do you hear me okay? Are you there?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. Loud and clear. Everyone, welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton at fmtrain.tv, where every day at 1 o'clock, we're doing FileMaker training. We are looking at samples that other developers have created, like yourself. We're being inspired by other people's great ideas and work. We create our own ideas. We help inspire you. We do training. We have all sorts of awesomeness. I'm happy to report that my internet connection in one of my offices has been restored. Thank you, Comcast, for finally getting it together. Only took tier 2 tech support where they read, "Oh yeah, your cable modem may have died. Thank you for that." So anyway, today is Friday. Today we have Kyle Williams here. It's very exciting, and we're going to take a look at the upcoming broadcast schedule. Margaret, what do we have on the upcoming broadcast schedule?
So today we have the wonderful Kyle Williams. Monday we have day 4 of Solve Complex Problems with Simple Reasoning in FileMaker with Nick Hunter. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is the Christian Olsen extravaganza. 2 days of Wolfpack updates, and then 1 day of Wolf Toolbox. And then Friday is MBS ExecuteSQL for advanced FileMaker developers. So.
And who's doing that? Who's doing that one?
That would be Kyle.
Kyle. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Well, it's a lot of action-packed stuff going on. So for those of you wondering, I'm not doing a lot here with you. I'm actually working very hard in getting the certification test training curriculum coming up. So Margaret, if you go to fmtrain.tv, go to the basic page. But yeah, on the left side, you see the live tab. On the right side, you'll see the certification. We are going to be doing intensive FileMaker certification testing to get you over the hump, to get you. So a lot of people who are taking this have taken the test and missed the pass by this much. And my goal is to take people who have some FileMaker experience and give them the knowledge, the information they need to finish passing the test. And it's going to be, I would say, a solid week. It'll probably go a number of days beyond a week, but it's going to be at 11 o'clock time frame. It's not free. It's curriculum or training that we're going to be providing at 11 o'clock. And it's so if you have our complete bundle and you're current, you'll be able to watch that. I highly recommend you get the training bundle, because the training bundle comes with everything you need. It includes a copy of FileMaker if you need that. It includes all our video training. It includes the certification training. It comes with a number of sample and products that you can't get otherwise. So the complete bundle is really complete. In fact, even Kyle Williams will be there watching the certification training, because he's an awesome guy and he wants to show support for the company. So Kyle will be there. I know Larry will be there. A bunch of you will be there. I'm very excited to have you there. So if you don't see me here, it's because I'm working literally on that curriculum, on basically this PDF handout that you will be given during the event. And so my goal is to get it all lined up, and I'm started early, so it's good to go. So that's a big thing. The other issue I want to point out is that if you have our complete training, we also have 5 hours, about 5 hours of Jacob Taylor beginning to end, slowly going through the process of building a FileMaker server on Amazon EC2. So it's a video thing that we had him record, and we had kind of published the first hour. Then we kind of got busy with other stuff and kind of forgot. So my team is not supposed to forget about important things. They forgot. They went, "Oh, by the way, we forgot about this awesome content." So this weekend, by tomorrow, we're going to send an email out to everyone tomorrow or Sunday. It'll be an email with everyone where you can find this training. So it's how to build the EC2 server, what kind of settings you need, all that kind of stuff. And then it goes to the server setup, the Corretto, the Java, everything you need to know end to end to build that server. So we have that coming up if you're part of the complete bundle training. So we have free content, which is the 1 o'clock time frame. Then we have other stuff that you can get involved with. And if you buy it on an annual subscription, we really appreciate it. It helps pay the bills, helps everyone stay employed here. And it's also going to provide you some valuable training, because I know a bunch of you are going to be taking the certification. I've already talked to you immediately right after we get done with this training, January 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, probably a couple days after that. My suggestion would be to take the certification at the end of the following week. Take it in person, take it at home. And so by that, it'll still be as fresh as possible. And if you spend time doing this, you will get certified. We'll get you over the hump. and we need at least a 62%, right? So when I went to school, 62% was like a D minus, right? But a D minus at Claris, I guess, is good enough. So they don't set their bar too high. So we're going to get everyone over that 62%, which will be great. All right, Kyle Williams, are you ready to drive us forward today?
All right, I'm ready. So today we're going to be discussing more ExecuteSQL. So let me go ahead and get our.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Question? Can I ask a question? So did you? Margaret, this is a question I always ask people when they show up here. So we're talking about ExecuteSQL, and in broad strokes for those of you who. So is this like day 2 of this conversation? I missed day 1.
Yes, this is day 2. So we did beginners last Friday, and we're doing advanced stuff today.
Okay, so I have a question. Do you want to just summarize in like 2 or 3 minutes? What is this, and why should I give it?
Okay, so ExecuteSQL, it's a great way to get your information without having to build extra relationships in your relationship graph. So, oftentimes we want to.
Yeah, keep going. That's focus on that.
Okay, yeah. So it's another way to get information. So there's the execute data API script step, or there's ExecuteSQL, which is a function which is actually much more convenient because you can create all kinds of formulas and you can query stuff within your formula without having to do any extra script steps. So I use ExecuteSQL all the time. I think it's wonderful, but it does have some drawbacks, and I will also discuss those again later in this presentation.
Okay. So let me just hit one thing, and then I'm going to let you folks go. I'm going to go and work on the curriculum, the certification curriculum, right? So multiple little slave minions here working on training in parallel. We're parallel processing, Kyle. So you're doing the live stream, and I'm working on this stuff coming up. So ExecuteSQL, once again, the critical point, the critical couple points is that it allows you to get data or generate a report without creating the underlying relational diagram elements. Like you're going to build a report, and I want all these things. And so maybe you're using anchor buoy, and you're going to set up a separate anchor buoy to drive the report. You can do it that way. Or you can use this SQL statement to build the relationships ad hoc. It constructs a relationship in the air immediately. It processes the data, and then it dissolves that relationship. So it builds it, so it keeps you from adding schema to your FileMaker solution. Fundamentally, I'm just going to say this out loud, super important. That's where your time savings comes in. Okay, so why do you want to use SQL? Because you're fundamentally an SQL person. You already know it. You're comfortable with it. And 2, it'll help you cut the corner on building a report faster. For once you have the data in FileMaker and you build the structural relationship, doing stuff in SQL is not going to be generally faster. It's like, oh, well, if we do it through SQL is a much better product and it'll be 10 times faster. It doesn't work that way, right? SQL, understand this, is that you write it, FileMaker, because I talked to the engineer who wrote this stuff, Clay Mackel, and he was always perplexed by when people say, oh, it's going to be so much faster. He says, no, we have to translate the SQL into FileMaker-ish language that we understand. Then we process it the same way we always do. So there's not an SQL engine. It's a translator. It translates it into FileMaker-ish stuff. It does the work for Draco. It brings it back, then it translates it back in SQL. So technically, it's doing extra work. So I just want to say up front that if you're using a SQL database like MySQL, it's going to, in terms of just raw data management performance, it's going to blow the doors off of FileMaker. But FileMaker has its own benefits, right? We understand that. So I just want to point that out because we always have people going, why don't you use SQL everywhere? Because it's so much faster. I'm like, no, it's not in FileMaker. Okay, cool. All right, see you guys. I'm going to go work on the certification training. I'm out, dog.
All right, thanks, Richard. Welcome back, everyone. So last time we discussed SQL for beginners. We kind of got into the introduction of SQL virtual tabs, and let me move that out of the way. Where is it? There it is. Okay. So today we're going to continue the introduction to SQL virtual tabs, and then we're going to get into the SQL for the intermediate to advanced developer. So let's go ahead and get into this. So last time we kind of started with this, and we realized we kind of jumped ahead of the schedule for the day. So we're bouncing back to this, and we're going to discuss This is the new virtual table that they introduced with FileMaker 19.4, which is the FileMaker base table fields. And if we run that, you can see it gives us all the data for all of our base tables. So this is one of our base tables. It gives us all of our fields for it. And then it gives us some extra information to tell us what kind of field type it is. If it's decimal, then that's a number field. Varchar is a text field. Binary, that would be your container field. And I'm sure there's some other ones in here. There's the date and the timestamp and time. So those are the main ones they give us. And then it's trying to understand what the rest of this means is really hard. So I created a custom function that's going to help explain that a little better. And I just wanted to also note that we can use a where function here. And the where function, we can get the base table by its name. And then we're getting the fields only for that base table. So when we run that, we're getting this base table, and we're getting all of the information that we need for that base table. So there's only a few fields in there. So what does all this mean? So that's where we get into this custom function that I created. And this returns JSON. So rather than looking at this first record here and seeing contacts, ID contacts, decimal, okay, what is 1? What is normal? What is this 1? What is this 3? We can instead go into here, and we can see that we have the field ID is one of the ones. We have the field repetition count. So this would be how many repetitions there are in that field. Most fields are only going to be 1 unless it is an actual repetition field. So we have the field type, which is decimal, and the modification count, that's what the 3 was for. So when we're back here looking at, I don't know why it always scrolls to the bottom. So when we're back here looking at this, we have our 3 here, and the other 2 are 1s. And again, it's scrolled to the bottom. Okay. So that 3 at the very end, that's our modification, record modification count, how many times that record's been modified. And then also with this custom function, we can get just that one base table and all of its fields in a way that we can see and we can understand what it all means. Also, additionally, there's another parameter I added to this. And this parameter, if I put a 1 in it, it's going to give us any table occurrences that use that base table. So that way we can then expand upon this and get all we can see what the other table occurrences are for that base table. So it gives us our table ID and how many times our table's been modified. Table name. So hopefully that makes sense. We need a FileMaker hat. That's just looking at Discord. They're commenting about Harry Potter and the hat. Okay, so moving on. So these are some virtual tables that were already in FileMaker. This came out, was it, I'm trying to remember which version it was. I think it was with 12 when ExecuteSQL first came out. I think that's when they introduced these. So there's FileMaker tables and FileMaker fields are the other 2. And so this will give you some little bit more information. And again, this is really hard to see and understand. So we got our contacts, our table ID for the contacts table. And then, yeah, again, this is really hard to follow. You have to look at the documentation to understand what all this means. And once again, we can reference a table by its name, and then we just get that table's information. So this is actually it's actually 2 records. So we're just gonna try this. So here we can see the different records. So again, this is a field separator, and this is our record separator. So record separator, field separator. If I want it to be a comma space, I can do that, and it'll add a comma and a space. So basic stuff there. So we want to know what all this means. And also we have the field. So this you kind of recognize from the previous demo. So this works very similar to the new virtual table. It's giving us the exact same information, but this gives us information for every table occurrence. So that's why they gave us the new function that only gives us the base table information, and it doesn't give us all the tables. So the old way was giving us every table occurrence in our file, which was a lot longer. So the new function is a little bit faster. So again, what does all this mean? So that brings us back to our new custom function, JSON FileMaker tables. So it's a new version of it that gives us all the information we need in a JSON format. So this we can use when we're building add-ons and configurators, and we want to get information about our table and the fields within that table, stuff like that. It can be very helpful for when we're creating configurators for our add-ons. And again, we can also return data from just one table, just like that. And it actually gives us the table we're looking for, as well as other table occurrences from that same base table. And then I also did the same thing with the FileMaker fields to give us all the information in a way that we can see and understand it. So this is all the fields for that table. Oh, this is all the tables. Okay, table occurrences. So I'm not sure why this should have a bunch of fields in it. It's got the first field. Huh. Okay, so if we just want the fields for the one table, we can get that here. And it gives us our table and all of our fields for that table. So I think that was it. And then this might be just a duplicate record. Yeah. Anyhow, I would probably delete that one. So there's those. Are there any questions on the virtual table section?
Virtual tables, everyone. No, I don't see any currently.
Nothing? Okay. All right. Ruben's typing something here. Awesome. All right, so it's all about useful functions within FileMaker, different ways we can get data, different types of data that we can get. So for today's demonstration, I created a custom function that colorizes all of this. So this is also included in this file. So like if I had all this red and I wanted to colorize it so I can see and understand it, like you can see with the MBS plugin, I just thought that would be much easier to see and understand the formulas. Versus just seeing a bunch of black text. So how do we formulate things as a professional developer so that it doesn't break over time? So you can see here I'm using a custom function that's SQLT, and it's looking at this field reference. Notice there's no quotes on either side of it, so it's a direct reference to that field. So that way if the table name ever changes, the field name ever changes, this reference won't break. So this is going to be a custom function that looks at the field directly, and then it gets the table name from this reference. So that's what SQLT is. So here we're selecting the row ID and row mod ID, which is our get record ID and get record modification count. So that's what those mean. So explains it right there. So when we run this, it's going to give us all of our FileMaker record IDs. So this isn't the primary key ID, it's actually FileMaker's record ID behind the scenes. And then the modification ID, how many times that record's been modified. So counting records. So a lot of this is similar to what we covered last Friday, but it's in a different context. So now we're looking at how would an advanced developer do this. So the way this works, let me step into this here. So we have our let function, and our let function is populating this variable. And this variable is a list of values. So it's a list of values, and these values put together our query. So we have our select, and then here I'm using the SQL function for counting, and we're going to count the row IDs. So the row ID is FileMaker's record ID. and from the table, and then we're using our custom function to reference this table from this field reference. And then we're coming in the end, we're saying execute SQL. Here's my SQL formula. So my SQL formula, then we have our row separator and our record separator, or our field separator, then the record separator. So when we run this, we're getting the count of records in that table. And what I like about this is I can actually comment out. I can put a little comment there. And if I color, you can see it disables that line. So it makes it really convenient and simple. We'll get into that a little bit more here. So here I have a let function that's getting the result. It's populating a variable called result. And it's using this formula here to select all of the first name, the last name from this table using this. So SQLF is for getting the field from this context. So we're indirectly looking at the contact's name first field, and it's getting the field name from that. And it's not only getting the field name, it's putting in the quotes. So let me take this out just for a moment. I'm gonna just show you what's going on here. Copy, go to the data viewer. Get rid of all of that. So here, if I evaluate it, it's going to give us a bunch of data. So maybe I want to disable this line and evaluate it again. What am I missing here? Select. Oh, because this is a comma. So yeah, it's a separator between the first name and the last name. So in order to have multiple fields referenced, you have to put a comma here. So that's what that is. But yeah, I like being able to just comment out a section there whenever I need, especially when you get these really long formulas, especially when you have where and then you have all these different where variables in your function. You can disable certain things, like you don't want it to include between these two dates. Just for a moment, you want to see what it does without that line. It helps for troubleshooting. So I brought this into the data viewer so I can show you what this is doing. So if I say copy, paste, comment out that bit there. So you can see it's putting together a list, and then the list starts with select, and then you have your first name, comma. So the custom function is not only pulling out the field reference, it's also putting the quotes around it, which is really important if you have a space in between. So if that was a space, or maybe it was a pipe or some other separator, you don't want this to break because it has some word separator in between the two words. So you have to be very careful of that. We want to make formulas that don't break. So it wraps all of our fields in quotes, and the other one wraps our table in quotes. So that's how that works. And then at the end here, it's just going to run the execute SQL with this query, and then any parameters we have here, row separator and all of that, we control outside of this here. So when we evaluate it, it's going to populate all the data that we want. So I'm just going to say cancel. So just like that. So here I'm doing value count, so you can see how many records it's returning. And then I have a little separator here, and then it's showing the result below it. Looking for any questions. Can you also show custom function SQLT for a second? So the custom function, if I go up to file here, manage, custom functions, and I scroll down, I got a whole bunch of custom functions in here for you guys. So the T, just so you can see what that looks like, we're starting with our field reference. So there's a field. We're going to get the field name from that reference. And then, so the field name, that's a fully qualified name with the colon in between the table and the field. So that's what we're getting here. We're getting the table and the field name. And then we're going to separate that. So we have substitute, and we're substituting the double colon with a return carriage, which is going to give us a list. So now that we have a list here, we want to get the value. So we're getting the first value of those two values. So the two values are our table name and our field name. Here we're getting the first name, or the first value, and then we're going to wrap it in quotes. So we're going to use a quote function to wrap it in quotes. The SQL function works the same way. It just gets the second. It's the exact same formula. It just gets a second value. And then SQL is very similar. We're going to get into that when we get into relationships and joins. So that's where you'd want to use that. Row ID is the SQL parameter for, yes, it is the record ID. The row ID equals record ID. So SQLF and SQLT are text formatting. Not sure I get that part. Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, these functions are formatting the field reference into what we want out of that field reference. So if we want the name and we want it wrapped in quotes, then we're going to use this function. If we want the table also wrapped in quotes, then we're going to use this function. So it should make sense. So distinct function. So I'm just going to run that, and notice that it's no longer 5,000 records. It's now 4,944 records. So we're getting distinct records, both first name and last name. So that's distinct with both of these in mind. You can also separate that into distinct for just the one field or both the fields. And I believe that's shown on the next one. Oh, so here we're counting the distinct first name and last name from this table. So pretty much the same idea. We're using SQL functions here to count the records, and then we're getting the distinct records or the unique records. So this is the equivalent to FileMaker's unique values function, but in SQL. I'm not sure why I kept that here, but I think that's showing the original from the beginner's version. So this shows how it was, and this is showing how we do it as advanced developers so it doesn't break over time. So if I run this, I'm getting this distinct first name, distinct last name. And again, if I wanted to comment this section out, I'm going to want to remove this little comma here, and then I can run it, and then I can get just the distinct first names. So if I want to add that back, I have to put the comma back and then remove that, and then it'll calculate everything. Looking for questions. I don't see anything yet. Okay, so moving on. Oh, looks like Dennis just joined in on Discord. Okay. All right. So here we're concatenating with the select function. So there's lots of things you can do to change the look of everything. And again, I don't recommend using the plus sign. It's best to always use the double quotes because then that won't break. Sometimes the plus sign will cause your concatenation to break because it doesn't work well with formulas. So when you're using formulas, you always have to use a double pipe. If you're just putting together strings of text, then the plus sign is fine for that. So then I also explain it here that the plus symbol can sometimes break it. It does work for string, but not for formulas or functions like that. So this won't actually work because we're using the plus sign before a function. But up here will work because we're using the double pipes. So here, the where function. So this is the most powerful part of this because you can get the where and you can look up just one record at a time, or this is completely customizable here. So we're going to get into that. So here we're just getting our first name and last name from this one record. So you can see it gets that data really fast because we're not asking for much. So let's move on. So in the demo file, I don't know if we posted the demo file yet for today?
Oh, we have not. I just got that back actually. So
okay,
nice
so
timing.
in the demo file here, I added a couple PDFs in here. So I just wanted to include this. This is something Beverly Voth came up with a long time ago. Oh, there's our first two. So it was version 12 because it's FileMaker 12. These are our virtual tables and what it all means. So Beverly Voth, I learned a lot about SQL from reading this document. So I wanted to share that with you. And it goes through in heavy detail everything in FileMaker with ExecuteSQL. So that's going to be really helpful. So yeah, somewhere in here, this is actually where I learned this trick with coalesce right here. So right there is where I learned it. It's like, hey, that's cool. And then reading through here, she teaches you how to use it, and she's like, this will convert it from UTC timestamps and format into FileMaker formats. So yeah, it's a lot to go through. I'm not going to go through it all right now, but definitely recommend reading through this to learn a little bit more. And we're going to go into that function a little bit more here today. So this is just demonstrating that you can use it to format your dates a little differently. So here's the UTC format, timestamp, date, and time. And then here's the FileMaker version using that function. So in this showing all the individual functions and how I would set that up. So if I were to run that, you can see it gets all the data that we want. So here, because we have everything with commas, I can actually go through here and I can just comment out a bunch of this stuff, and I can run it. It doesn't break. So really handy. So let me move on here. So the coalesce function, what it does is it returns the first non-null argument. So here I'm using it to look at the first name, the middle name, and the last name from this table between these records. So I'm using the between this record, and then we have a second question mark, and that's referencing this parameter right here. So we're going to get all that data from those. And then I have a separator here where we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to use the coalesce function. So the coalesce function, we're pulling all those three fields into our coalesce function, and then we're going to see what that gives us. So it's going to be a little bit different because it's going to get us the non-null values. So when I run it, you can see this first value is null, and so it returns Johnson instead. So it ignores the last value. It's just going to give us our first non-null value. So at the second value, it's going to give us Rosemary, and because there's no non-null value before it, it's going to give us that name. So and then here we have two null values, ending with Lewis as the third value. So you can see here it gives us Lewis. So I think this is very useful when you're merging multiple records together, because the first record might not have the email or the phone number, but the second record does have that information, and so therefore it'll pull the first valid phone number or email from the list of values. So that could be one place where you can actually use that. So personally, I use coalesce all the time for formatting my dates and times. That's my primary use for it, but this is the official use for it. This is what it's designed to do. So I wanted to include that today since we're discussing advanced SQL. Cool. So the file has been posted. Awesome. So here we're going to use the numvalue function, which is the same as get as number from FileMaker. So we're getting all these timestamps, the date, the time, and then we're returning the numbered value of those. So with the numvalue function here. Okay. So here we have select our number field from the one record. Oh, I see what it's doing. It's going to convert that number that we're returning from this first record. So it's returning the number from this record and using cast to convert it into a date, timestamp, or time. So in SQL, there's also a convert function. So there's a cast function and convert function. They more or less do the same thing. So I believe when FileMaker is putting this together, they just did the cast function rather than have two similar functions. This does everything that the convert function does, so why not take advantage of that? So again, that's why not everything in SQL works in FileMaker's ExecuteSQL. They created a simplified version of it. So there's a limited number of functions we can use from the world of SQL. So we're using the cast there to convert it into these different types of values. And this is, converting that the number. So we got the number, it's converting it into a date, and then it's using coalesce to convert that into a FileMaker formatted date. So yeah, here we're converting this number into these different types of data. So we got the date, the timestamp, and the time. And then if we go down to the bottom here, what are we doing? So the number is, so this is basically just showing concatenation in action. The number is 12.3 and the date for that number is this date. So what is the difference between numval and cast filled as integer? I don't know that there is a difference because numval gets it as a number and cast as an integer returns it as a number. So those are the same thing. So Ruben asked that question. So that is a good question. So yeah, they both work the same. Sometimes, there's multiple ways to get the exact same data. It's all, how we want to get our data. So we're using the where function between, this is showing the between function versus using greater than or equal, less than or equal. So these first two looks like they get the same data. Let's go ahead and run that, see what happens. So yeah, these first two sections get the exact same data with two different approaches to it. So just like the numval versus cast as integer, there's multiple ways to get the exact same data. So here we're using the between function combined with the and with our two variables here, which are defined here and here. So our first question mark is this, second question mark is that. So we're between those two values. Here we're, again, between the two values. So we're using greater than or equal to this value, less than or equal to that value. So both those are doing the same thing. And then here, this is why I added this. Because in FileMaker, you can hold the Alt button as you select the greater than key. So Alt greater than gives you this greater than or equal to symbol. So you can use those in FileMaker, but SQL does not recognize those. So I just wanted to make note of that. If you're trying to use those symbols, they're not going to work in your SQL formula. SQL expects to see it separated as greater than equal to, with the equal always after the greater than or less than symbol, just like that. Moving on. So here we're using the lower and the like operators. So the reason we're using the lower operator is because oftentimes the name has a capital letter at first. It may not always be proper cased. Sometimes it could be all lower, it could be all uppercase. It all depends on how the users enter their data. And because we have no control how the users enter the data, we're going to use the lower function so that way we know that we're evaluating everything as lowercase text. So we're getting that as lowercase text within our SQL formula. And so that way we can use lowercase text here in our like parameter. So if I run this, here we're getting everything that starts with CO because there is no percent. There's also some other wildcards we're going to cover later. Here we're going to do the percent operator on both sides, which gives us not only everything that starts with CO, it also gives us stuff that ends in CO or has CO in the middle of. And then at the bottom, we're starting with the percent sign and ending with CO, nothing after it. So it's finding only things that end with CO. So one of the other wildcards, let me just go ahead and show it to you. If I put an underscore here, it's going to look for any actual number or letter ahead of the CO. And then percent gives you anything, any letter, number, or empty value. So it doesn't even have to have a value when you're using the percent wildcard. The underscore does have to have some type of value. So that's the difference between those. So when I did that, now all of a sudden we're only getting Scott. And that's because it has one character before it. And then we're looking for CO, percentage. Percentage could be anything, including null value. So that's why when I change it like that, we're suddenly getting Scott. So it's a different wildcard. And at the end, we'll go over all those wildcards as well. What is the difference? Oh, okay, I'm reading the same question that was asked before. All right, so moving on. Here we have the where function again, and we're using the in operator. The in operator is great for any lists of values. So if I run this, it's going to give us any value between here. So we have this value, any of these three values. So right here, it's giving us those three values, those three records. So here we're creating a list of text. So text always has to be surrounded by apostrophes. So when you're using the in function with text, you have to put apostrophes around it. And here I'm just showing you can define it as a variable, and you can use that variable within your SQL formula, just like that. And here it's showing all of that data that matches these three names. So additionally, if we were to put the apostrophes around these numbers, it's not going to work because our number field that we're searching here, this number field requires numbers. So it's not going to find any text that looks like that. It's looking only for numbers. So if I run this now, suddenly it's like, wait a minute, that's not right. It's an invalid field type. You're looking for text in a number field. It's going to return an error. So I'm going to try something here to see if this works. Cast. And then at the end, let's say over here, S and T. Let's see if that works now. No. Oh, as INT, it is a number. Sorry. Varchar. There it is. Okay, so yeah, if you are searching a number field and it's not working because all of this is text and you don't want to go through and remove all those little apostrophes, you can use the cast function to convert your field that you're searching into a text field, or vice versa into a number field. If, well, actually not vice versa, because these can't be converted to numbers. So that only works with numbers. But yeah, so it just shows that you can change a number field into text for your evaluation. So anyhow, what comes after that? Where not operator. So same thing, but we're using the not operator to find anything that does not include these values. And there, you can see it started with 104, which is the first value after 103. So this is a lot of data, and it looks like I entered that field, so it's taking forever. So again, if you have too much data, you don't want to return that much data. If I go into here and I'm looking at my result, and I go length, I evaluate that. So this is a lot of data. That's 1,236,000. Trying to remember num to j text. This is kind of a neat little trick too if you want to try adding commas into it. I think it was just that. Maybe there's one more parameter after that. If that, so there you go. Kind of a neat little trick if you want to put commas in your number. So here we can see that it's 1,236,997. So a little tip there. If you've never used that function, now you know that function with this one parameter here, the one and empty, is going to give you commas in your numbers. So kind of cool. Close that. So because I have over 1 million characters in this response, it's taking forever to try to handle all that data. So you never want to get that much data in your response. When you go to try to parse that, it's going to be the same problem. It's going to bog down your solution. It's not going to be able to parse all that data very well. It's just too much information. So when you create your formulas, always try to make sure that you're not going to ever return this much data, because the users will get really upset when your app takes forever. It's one of those things to be very careful of when you're using SQL. Let's see. So here we're demonstrating the combination of and the OR operators in the same formula. So here we're selecting from this table where this ID is greater than or equal to this number, and is less than or equal to this number. So those two are combined. But then we're using an OR operator here to also search if it's greater than or equal to this number or less than or equal to this number. Alternatively, we could have used the between function here, and maybe that would have been a little simpler, but we're demonstrating the use of and or here. So that's why I did that way. So you can see there, it's giving us our data between 101 and 103, and also including the values between 111 and 113, just like we wanted. So here we're using where the condition is null and is not null. These are SQL functions. So if you're trying to evaluate all the data from this table where the titles are empty, there is no value in our title field, it's going to give us all of this where that one field is empty. I'm not sure where title is in here, but anyhow, the second part here, again, it's returning all of our records. Between the top part getting our first 3 records, and this is getting every other record of the 5,000. Just too much data, but just show you the difference between is null and is not null. So when I was first learning this, I would type not is null or something. That's like, and of course, if you do not is null, this doesn't work. It won't even recognize that. So you get this just an error message. So if you're getting the error message when you're trying to formulate, it's likely you probably made the same mistake, and it's just a matter of reversing the order of those values. So it's either is null or is not null. So there's a question. So the or acts as parentheses, kind of. So yeah, if I go back here, this is separating it between the first here, the first where, and our second where. So it is separating between these two sections for us. So that is correct. Alternatively, we could also add our brackets here, and down here, and that'll also still work. If I run it, it does the same thing. So you can separate it if you want. You don't really have to in this case. Yes, adding the brackets is better practice. I completely agree. So it'll work with or without them, but as you get more and more complicated formulas like this, it is probably a good idea if your formula is really complicated to go ahead and add those in there. In this case, they weren't really required, but it is definitely a best practice to do that. Again, I would also add it up here. So it's not just in the second half, but also the first half. And this way you know that it's isolating this completely individually from this. And then the or is the in between. So it's either this or this. So that is actually the best way to do it. That's the best practice. So definitely better to do that. So let's see, we did that already. So here it just shows concatenating again. Again, I don't recommend using the plus sign. Plus sign separates text, but doesn't work with functions. So it looks like, again, we have the plus sign there. So it is working. But if I were to use this and say and plus and, that doesn't work. So you can't use the plus sign in the middle there. How did I have that? So I think that did have an ampersand. Oh. So right then you kind of wish you could do an undo. There we go. Okay. So maybe I did that wrong. Plus. Okay, so the plus is still working. Oh, because this is technically text, I guess. But yeah, if I'm doing it before the year function and I swap that out with the plus, it doesn't work. I put it back the pipes, it works again. So yeah, it's always best practice to use the pipes. The plus will work sometimes, but not all the time. So here we're doing the CHR function. CHR is very similar. It works the same as the char function in FileMaker. So it's just getting the character reference. So if I were to change this to 67, it should return the C. So yeah, it completely. So there's our C that it threw in there. Instead of the, was it 9 or 13? So tab is 9, return carriage is 13. So there are no quotes around the plus, just, oh, yeah. So yeah, I figured what was going on. I was adding quotes around it and I didn't need to because it was between these two functions. And yeah, it was evaluating. It's weird because we're inside of here trying to evaluate, we're trying to formulate our formula in here. then I was trying to put the ampersand thinking I was adding text in between. But it's just the way this is set up. It's a little weird doing it here versus in the data viewer itself. So similar, but not quite the same experience. All right, so running this. So here we're just kind of demonstrating the different use cases for the stringval function inside of SQL. So here we're evaluating 5 times 3 to get our 15. And here's we're getting our row ID. So we know what the row ID is, 5205. And then here we're doing row ID times 2. So 5205 times 2. And then we can also use it with text. And then using the between to get our 3 records, the 04, 05, and 06. Okay. So here, what are we looking at? If I go to the top, okay, so this is showing the min, max, sum, and average functions. So if I run that, it took a couple seconds there. So we have our minimum value. So we are looking for the minimum value in this number field from this table. So it's giving us, this is the lowest value in that field within that table. And then here we're getting the max, same field from the same table. So from 0.02 to 99.99. Here we're summarizing all of those values and averaging all those values. So we're getting the sum and our average. So it seems fairly simple. Floor and ceiling also work in SQL. So here we're getting our actual value, and then we're using the floor function here. So we're getting the floor function within our SQL and getting the lowest value. Let me just run this. So it's looking at the value. So it's looking at this value, and then it's looking at the same value and getting, it's rounding down is what it's doing. So it's rounding down to the nearest full integer. And then sealing, it's going to do, what it does in FileMaker. It rounds up to the next full value. So just showing here that we're using floor inside our formula and sealing inside the formula. So yeah, lots and lots of stuff. So yeah, here we're demonstrating the actual fields that it's going to look at, and then we're going to use the trim function on the same fields, the rtrim and ltrim. So here we're getting our actual fields, and this is why I put spaces before and after the field. So we got space before and after, space before. And so here trim, it's going to trim the spaces before and after. Rtrim only trims the spaces after. Ltrim only trims the spaces before. So if I was going to use the function, I'd probably use trim over all these. But it depends on your use case. If you want to make sure you keep the spaces for whatever reason, before and after, you can do that. Okay, so moving on. Summarizing fields. So question has come up, can you summarize multiple fields together inside of your formula? So if I run this, it's going to take a moment, but you see this first formula is looking at number field, and this one's looking at number field 2, so number field 2. And then in the last part, we're summarizing the results from this field, the result from that field, and we're getting a total count within one single function. So right here, we're doing sum both number fields, and we're using the sum here, sum with the bracket, and then we're referencing our field with our custom function. So it's very important we use the custom function here so this doesn't break. And then we're using the operator here to add the sum of this field with the sum of that field within the same summary. So should make sense. All right, moving on. So round and square root functions also work inside SQL. So we're just going to run this. So we have our original value here, and then we're doing the exact same SQL searches to get this exact same number. But in here, we're using the round function. So we're using round, and we're getting only one digit after our decimal. So it's rounding to that 10th position. And in our last spot here, we're doing the square root of that same value, and we're getting the square root right here. Not sure how to pronounce Will Keefe's name. I don't know if I pronounced that right. No aggregates in FileMaker, error I got just the other day. So yeah, these are aggregate functions. So I'm not sure what he's commenting on there. Oh, add number, then first and sum. Yes. So yeah, that's on this last section here. It's summarizing the summary of this value with that summary of that value, totaling them together with this operator here. So if I wanted to, I could take this and go copy and go to the data viewer, and I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to take this part out of the equation here, just so that we can see what this is doing here. So copy, paste, comment that out. So here we can see what the raw formula is. So it is the sum in here, referencing the first field in quotes, the second field in quotes. So sometimes it's easier to see when we actually look at it this way. And it would just pull this variable that we're creating, which holds our list for our query. And then we can see and we can troubleshoot this really easily. So sometimes looking at all of this data up here can be a little confusing. especially when we get really complicated formulas. And really all we're trying to troubleshoot is what's going on here. So this allows you to be able to easily separate that out, see what's going on, see where a problem is. So see, we did that already. Okay, so case function. So a case function can be used a couple different ways. In this case, we're using it within our select statement. So we have our select here, and we're selecting the ID, we're selecting the number field, and then we're going to add in here, we're going to concatenate this last section. So I'm not sure if plus, maybe that should be the double pipe here. But basically it's going to concatenate this together. So we're adding all this space here. So this is like a tab that's tabbing it over so that way it aligns all of this so you can see what's going on. So then we're adding in our comment here if it's below 50 or above 70. So here, when the number field is greater than 70, then we want it to say above 70. So if this number field is less than 50, then we want it to say below 50. If neither of those is true, then it's going to go down here, and we want it to say between 50 and 70. So you can see as we're come down here, we can see this is between 50 and 70, and sure enough, that value is between 50 and 70. So you can see that it's doing exactly what we want all the way down the line. And that's how you use the case function inside of your select statement. So you can also use the case function inside of your order by. So we haven't gotten into order by yet, but since we're covering the case function, order by is the same as sort by in FileMaker. So in FileMaker, we're looking at this and we're going, okay, we want to sort our records by, but in SQL, it's actually called order by. So if you accidentally type sort here, that's what's going on when it's not working. SQL wants order by. So here we're doing order by case, and then we're ordering it by the city, or if the city is null. If the city is null, then we're going to sort by the state. Otherwise, we're going to sort by the city. So that's what it's doing here. So if I run it, so if the city is null, so here we have a null city, there's no city, it's going to sort by the state. Otherwise, if it has a city, it's going to use the city. So as it's sorting here, putting Arizona first, ahead of Carlsbad. And then all of these have cities. So it's sorting by the city and all of those. And down here, you can see it's sorting these at the end because Utah starts with U and Wyoming. So it's putting all that afterwards. See, there's a little question here. Trying to understand this question here. It says, when using aggregates in countries where the comma is a decimal separator, not the period, you still have to convert your number. So the number format, I think, is controlled by your system settings. So if you're working with numbers in another country that uses a comma instead of a decimal, no, it's not. Okay, well, I work primarily in America, so perhaps Nick knows the answer to that question. I think that's really a Nick question because he works in several different countries. He's going to have better knowledge on that. I work primarily just in America, so I don't really have to deal with that. So yeah, we'll bring that up next time Nick's on. Be like, hey, how do you handle commas instead of decimals in other countries? So that'll be a really interesting to hear his response. So okay, moving on. So here we're using upper, lower, and upper. So if we run this, it's using the upper in our SQL statement here, and it's getting the upper version of our first name and the lower version of our last name. From this record, we're also kind of introducing offset and fetch. So we discussed this last Friday. For those that haven't seen it, offset is going to look at your found set, but it's going to omit those first three records. It's going to only return the values from the fourth row on. And the row, again, that's your record. So each row, you have to think of it like an Excel table. So an Excel table, you have rows and columns. Each row is a different record. Each column is a different field. So offset 3 records, if I convert that into FileMaker lingo. So we're going to offset by 3 records, and we're going to fetch the first 10 from that offset. So it's actually getting records 4 through 13 here. So that's how that works. And you can see here it's using the upper to get the upper first name, lower to get the lower last name. Okay, so joins. So in SQL, in FileMaker, we can use the join function here. And the join function is going to combine 2 tables. So here we have our contacts table. We're getting the full name from our contact, and we're getting the total invoice value from our invoices table. So we're using from our contacts. So we're looking at the full name from our contacts table. And we're going to define that contact as a C. And then we're going to join that with our invoice. And we're going to give our invoice table an I. And so that allows us to put I dot before our name and C dot. So we have C dot here, I dot here. So this is looking at our contacts table, which is defined as C. This is looking at our invoices table, defined by this I here, as I. And then we're building the relationship using the on function. So this is where our relationship gets put together. We have our C for our contacts table. We're getting our field from our contacts table. And we're saying this field here equals, and then we're looking at our invoices table with this I dot. So equals invoices. And then we're getting just the ID field from our invoices table. So this is our contact ID from our invoices table. Our contact ID from the invoices equals the contacts ID from the contacts table. So that's our relationship we're building. And if we run that, we can see it works great, pulls in all of our data. And it only took a little more than half a second. So not bad. That's a very simple join. And again, these tables are both fairly small. They only have 5,000 records. When you have over 500,000 records, this will be a lot slower. So again, you got to keep context in mind. I would not normally use this with invoices because invoices and contacts can both have a lot of data. So when you're creating a join, something I always tell everybody is when you're creating an ExecuteSQL formula, it's starting from scratch. It has a blank slate. It does not know what you're sourcing until it looks at this and evaluates this. Then once it evaluates this, it goes, okay, I want this column from this table. I want this column from this table. And I need to join this column from this table with this column from this table. It builds a relationship on the fly, looking at all the data it hasn't looked at before because it's a blank slate. So it's building the relationship on the fly. I always try to avoid building relationships in my SQL statements in FileMaker because of that reason. It doesn't know any of the data until you tell it what to look at. It will ignore all the other fields, which is great. It's only going to look at the fields you're referencing. So again, these are columns in the table. So columns and rows. It's looking at these columns, it's comparing them, and then it's building the relationship based on that. Here I wanted to also show you the other custom function. So I'm going to come down here and we're just going to comment this section out. And let's go ahead and bring this in. And I'm just going to show off my custom function to bring the color down here. So here I got, we're using the SQLT, but instead of referencing the C dot on all of these and the I dot, what we have here is a custom function that does all that for us. So this makes sure that we're getting the right table reference and the right field reference using this function. And then it's doing the same exact calculation we did up above, but now we're doing from this table as, so again, we're building that relationship from as the table. So we're using the table name instead of just a C, it's using the table name here. So where it says as C, we're using as, and then our field reference, our table reference, sorry. That's our table reference because of the T. Okay, so then we're using the join function with the T as, and then we're getting the table name from this SQLT function. So that works the same as right here, as I. Here we're using as, and then we're just using the table as reference. So now this makes this part really simple because then we can just use our TF function. So we know we're getting the table and the field joined together in a way that SQL wants it from here. So we're referencing this field one time with this one function, and what it's returning is context in quotes dot field name in quotes. So I'm just going to bring this into the data viewer so you can see what I'm talking about. So I know that, you know, to say it and hear it is one thing, to actually see it in action, that's a little more valuable. So this function here, it's going to return the table name and the field name, both in quotes, and it's going to separate it with that period separator. So that way the SQL command knows what you're doing. So that should make sense now that it's comparing what we have here with the C and the field. And then we're using equals here. So it's the same as up here, equals. And then we're referencing our table and field here. Whereas here we're using I dot for our table and then our field reference. So very much the same thing. And if I run this, it actually ran a little faster doing it this way. So instead of the 600 milliseconds, it actually did it in under 400 milliseconds. So it definitely helps to use that function. It evaluated even faster in this method. So really cool.
Real quick, Kyle, before we
Sure.
move on to the next one, it is like 2:16.
Oh,
So I can give you like another 10 minutes or ish so.
Okay.
And then
Yeah,
we have more
we're
days
almost
scheduled
done.
for you, so I don't mind
Yes.
adding them.
Yeah.
Coming back to that.
Yeah, next week we're going to cover doing this all and getting JSON responses instead, which that shows a lot of different methods and techniques. And I really love that section, so I look forward to that. But yeah, we're at 29 out of 44. We could probably skip the last couple today. We don't have to show everything. So I'm going to go through this a little quicker. So here I'm not going to show everything. It's the exact same as the last record, the last example, but we're putting left in here. And that's going to include all the records from the left. So when I run this, even if there's no value from the right, the left join shows everything from the left, even the ones that don't have value in the right, whereas the join function shows only the values that have records in both sides of the relationship. So that's the difference there. There's also a right join and a full join, which are not they're not part of FileMaker's SQL world here. Okay, so union. The union simply combines this select statement with this select statement, and then we can also order by down here below it. So just show that in action. There you can see all the Richards and Kyles combined together. And if we want to remove that comment, run it again, it's going to sort everything ascending by the first name. And descending, if you want to do descending, DESC. Okay, so moving on. It's running out of time. Okay, so where lower first name like. So we've seen the like function in action. This is grouping by. So it's grouping by the state. So it's getting the sum and the average. It's grouping everything by the state. And we have the state reference there. So this is a little tricky when you start adding multiple fields up here. It's actually going to break. It only wants the one field up here that you're going to group by, and then everything else is aggregate functions. So when grouping by, if you want more than one field, you can add more than one field, but you have to add that field to your group by section in order for it to group by everything. So here you can see it's grouping by the state, and it's showing us the summary and the averages by state. So here we're introducing the halving function. So numbers in that field that are greater than 200. That's where the sum is greater than 200, sorry. And then here we're doing the average, where the average is greater than 50, and we're returning those values. So you can see how the halving function can help out. And it just helps narrow down your search. Oh, distinct, yeah. You can probably drop the distinct function in here. Also, you'll notice it alphabetizes everything, so you don't even have to use the order by. I was going to say sorted by, but you don't have to use the order by when you're using group by, because it's already going to alphabetize everything. So it's just kind of a neat little side product. Existing, probably not going to use this. Basically, it allows you to test if this pulls any values. It's going to basically toggle this select function on and off. So I showed that last week. We can review last week's video for that. So I added a few extras here. There's the any function, and it explains it up here how that works. So it's going to find any value within this, and it's going to use any value it finds within here. Similar to how the in function works, it's going to create a list of values, and it's going to evaluate based on that list of values here. So if I run it, it's finding the list of values, and then it's returning only the values that match in that list from this number field. So you can play around with that to get a better understanding of it. The sum function, so just like the any function, it works the same way. It's looking at it, it's finding some value here, it's building a list from this query, and then it's evaluating it, similar to as if you were adding a list into this using an in operator here instead of the equals. So basically it's like in and then whatever this equals. It's going to return all those results. So basically it returns the same things because it's getting some value. If there's some value in here, go ahead and return it. I'm not sure if there's any difference between any and some. Maybe somebody else has played with those functions more than I have, but to me they seem to be producing exactly the same results. So there's the any function and the result, same result. So it's going to, again, evaluate this, and if every single possible record here returns a result, only then will this actually do anything. So it's not returning anything because not every single record in here returns a result. So that's what the all function is. It'll only return a result if it finds something, if in every single thing it evaluates. So if anything doesn't evaluate something, it's not going to return anything. So I don't use any, some, or all very often, really ever, but that's how they work. They're in FileMaker, so I figured I might as well include those. Order by, we discussed that already, and you can order by descending, you can order by multiple directions and multiple fields, just like that. And I realize I'm going faster, sorry. Okay, so join, and so here I was just trying to show that you can use fetch first 10 rows, you can use percent of rows. So if you have 100, it's going to return 25 of them. If you have 200, it's going to return 50 of them, and so on. And you can change this offset to whatever you want. So if you're doing multiple searches and you want the first 10, first 20, and so on, you can offset by however many rows you did in your previous search to get the next set of results. So there shows some different variations there. So 41 out of 44, we're almost done. This these are the different arithmetic operators. So you got your usual add, subtract, divide, multiply. Percent, that is a modulo. So in FileMaker, we have the mod function. This is essentially the mod function. I could not get it to work in this. So if I run here, you can see it's doing the add, subtract, divide, multiply. But if I uncomment that part out and I run it again, it doesn't work. So I'm not sure what's going on, why they didn't include modulo, but that is part of SQL. So I wanted to just show that I didn't forget about it for those that know about it. It just doesn't seem to work in FileMaker. So in SQL, you can do things like this inside of brackets, and this would get any record that starts with a B, S, or a P, and then percentage, which is your wildcard. Unfortunately, this doesn't work in FileMaker. Neither does this, which would return anything that starts with A, B, or C, anything within that range. Some of these do work. So again, the underscore will be any number or letter. So this will actually work. So starting with a capital L, any value, number, letter, then it has an N. So if you're trying to look for London, that it would return London. But it wouldn't return anything with an empty value there. So if I run this, what is this doing? So we have any city from contacts where the contact is like, it starts with a capital C, any value in between, and then an R. So what that's doing is it's doing the first value or first letter and last letter, and it's only returning anything that starts with a capital C and ends with an R. So it's not going to do C space R. So if you wanted to use an underscore here, it's going to return completely different results. Currently, there is nothing that's C and then some letter, then R. I thought maybe there'd be a CHR, maybe, but basically that's what that's doing. It's the first letter, the last letter, and then the in between could be anything. Didn't miss anything. Okay, yeah, the amount of time I put into this file, I was trying to make sure I captured everything. So there's also like, and then this will find any ES in between any of your text anywhere. The other thing that I couldn't get to work in FileMaker is the exclamation wildcard, which is basically, even in JavaScript, that means not. So it's a Boolean value, not whatever's after it. So basically this would look for anything that is not starting with a B, S, or P. So if this would work in FileMaker, that's what it would do. This is your not character does not equal to, that's what that means. Okay, moving on. Putting it all together. So basically just a big long formula that has most everything you can do in the order you can do it. I don't have time to discuss with ties today. Sorry. It's part of SQL. It does work in FileMaker, but it has to do with relationships, and it would take too long. And I never really use that anyway, so kind of not really important. Okay, so I think I explained it a little bit here. Note that with use ties must specify order by. So yeah, that's another time. So if you're creating a raw query, you can actually use 2 dashes to comment out a section. So if I run this, it is not doing the last name, and I commented that inside of the SQL formula, which is similar to doing 2 slashes like this. So that I didn't cover last week. I probably should have. If you're doing your raw SQL, 2 slashes will so copy data viewer, just kind of show this in action real quick. Okay, and then we're going to take this, copy, paste, comment out. Okay, so right here, you can see that inside of our SQL query, 2 dashes, it got rid of the last name. and it's only returning the first name. So just show you that is actually inside the SQL. If I were to go over here and remove it and run it, then everything works. So return, it includes that field. Okay. Oh, that was it. Okay.
We're good.
I think that was it for today. I think the only other thing we had was to recover the things to watch out for. I don't know if you. Last week I got into everything to watch out for. I outlined it all right here. So you all have the demo file. Basically, you don't want to return a bunch of stuff that has way too much data. If you're returning more than 1 million characters in your response, you're getting too much data. It's going to kill your performance. If you're trying to use it with a table with more than 1 million records, it's too much. Don't do that.
Yes. We got 2 more
don't
days
put it in a loop.
Yeah, no, we've got 2 more days.
Yeah.
Not MBS next week, excuse me. It will be JSON and then NBS and
Yes.
ExecuteSQL after that. So
yeah, so next week
more.
we're going to dive into this creating JSON from SQL. That is really what I love to do the most when I'm using SQL, because JSON is so powerful, and just to be able to go in here and run it and be like, yeah, I can do anything with this. So
okay.
we're going to get into that next week.
That'll be awesome.
And then also custom functions. We'll get into that next week too if we have time. So, otherwise, it'll be part of our MBS.
Probably not if I had taken.
Yeah, I think that'll be MBS and custom functions on the final day.
Okay, so I'm going to run the exit music. Thank you very much, Kyle. We greatly appreciate it. It's really cool.
Thanks, everybody.
We will be seeing you next Friday.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!